To add an employee to the WebCOBRA system in order to send out a qualifying event notice when they terminate from your company, what you're going to want to do is from the WebCOBRA home screen here, you're going to want to scroll down to the QBs, Employees, and Retirees Direct Bill Participants section and go to Qualified Beneficiary, Add New. Now here what the system is going to have us do is enter in all of the pertinent information here in a series of steps. So you can see we have 8 steps here on the right hand side that we're about to go through. And the first step here is simply adding the employee to a client or employer. Now you'll likely only have access to your own company, so you'll only have the one option here. If we do have your company set up for any sort of departments or divisions or anything like that, you'll be able to select yes here and be able to choose the appropriate department or division, etc. on the next step. Now down here below, we do have some special situations here that the WebCOBRA system can handle if these situations do occur. We have the ability to process any sort of denial of coverage due to a gross misconduct termination or somebody not notifying you within a certain amount of time for certain qualifying events. We do have the option to print only a HIPAA certificate of credible coverage. We have the ability to process any severance packages in reference to COBRA or anything like that as well. We do have retiree options within the WebCOBRA system. However, that is a separate service that we offer. So if you do have an employee that is retiring from your company, what we'll have you do is instead of adding them as a retiree here, we'll have you put in the actual event, qualifying event as retirement. So likely what you'll do is within the first step here is just simply go down to the bottom here and hit choose and continue. Step 2 here, we are going to be selecting the qualifying event type, and you can see we have several different life event or qualifying event types to choose from. So here we have either termination, retirement, death, loss of dependent status, reduction of hours, or divorce and legal separation being the most common ones that you'll probably process. And out of all of those, the most common one will be termination here. If you do have anybody that is coming off of leave of absence or an FMLA leave and needs to be sent a COBRA notice, what you're going to want to actually do is process that as a termination. The reason being is because any sort of leave of absence or FMLA qualifying event that you process within the system will actually produce a FMLA notice as if they are going on to FMLA for the first time. Now obviously we're going to want to send them a COBRA qualifying event notice instead of an FMLA notice, so we're going to want to process that as a term as well. So we're going to go ahead and process a termination or qualifying event type and hit choose and continue. Now here it's going to ask us when the qualifying event occurred. Basically, when is their termination date? So let's just plug in, for example, 1/31 of 2013. And when was the administrator notified of the event? Basically, when were you notified of this event, whether when you were notified of the divorce or when you processed the term or whenever. So I'm just going to go ahead and put in today's date for that. And the event description here is going to be able to be modified for the termination qualifying event type. So if you don't like the word termination, if you want it to say resignation or voluntary termination, or even if you want it to say leave of absence here, if you are indeed processing somebody who's coming off of a leave of absence, you can pretty much edit that to say whatever you want to. It's not going to affect the actual length of the qualifying event type. It's still going to be 18 months since it is a termination. Literally, the only thing that is changing is the wording on the notice to say whatever you're putting in there instead of the word termination. So I'm going to go ahead and process that like this and hit save and continue. Now here what the system likes us to do is put an employee and any of their dependents into what's known as a group file. And here it's just simply asking us to name the qualified beneficiary group. What I typically like to do is do the last name, comma, first. Here, this QB group identifier is an optional field, but we do have it automatically populate with this 15-digit number and letter character here. So that's just a unique identifier that allows this specific record to be uniquely identified above and beyond the employee's name and or SOCH. And then here it asks us how many members do we want to add, including the main participant. Basically, how big is the family? If this employee has a spouse and a child, that's going to be 3 total members because we want to include the employee in that number as well. And the other neat thing about this is we can actually transfer the COBRA General Notice employee group, including dependents. So basically what that means is if you've already entered in this employee to receive an initial notice, we can actually select the employee here from this list, hit save and continue, and that will actually pre-populate the employee's personal and demographic data within the next few steps, and it's just a little bit of a time saver if you've already put this person into this system as either a new hire or somebody newly coming on to the any sort of COBRA eligible plan. So ahead with establishing a new qualified beneficiary group and hitting save and continue. Now here at this top of the screen here, we're going to be entering in the QB information. Basically, it's the employee's information. So the first thing that we're going to be doing here is the employee's name. It's going to want us to put in the first name first and then the last name last. So we're going to plug in John Smith. It's going to want us to put in a date of birth. One quick note I do want to make here is that the system doesn't automatically tell you right up front which fields are required and which ones are not. However, if I were to try to proceed here without putting in a required field, if I were to just try to go ahead and hit save and continue, the system will prompt us here that we are missing all of these pertinent information. So it will prompt you if you do miss something that the system wants. So it is definitely going to want the date of birth. QB ID, that is a optional field. That's kind of an additional identifier, again, above and beyond the name or the employee's SOCH. The Social Security number is technically an optional field, but it is something that we do like to have on file in case we ever need to contact the carrier to resolve any sort of urgent issues for the employee or anything like that. So we're going to plug that in there. Employee ID is, again, another optional field. Gender here, pretty self-explanatory. Title, this is just something that where you can get as formal or informal as you want to. This option here, print and display letters, what that basically means is COBRA law actually has a indication here that's or requirement rather that the employee's letter be addressed to the employee and any covered dependents. And that's actually something that we already have built into the back end of the system. So that's not anything that you have to worry about switching from no to yes or anything like that. You can just simply leave that as no, and it's going to actually produce for you on the back end of the system when the letter produces. Here, salary, we don't need any sort of salary or payroll information in the system whatsoever. It's not pertinent to COBRA. Years of service, same thing. We don't need any of that. It does recommend that you put in the original hire dates in order to populate some of that information that produces on the Certificate of Credible Coverage. So we're going to put in a hire date of 1/1/2000. Here, the contact information, pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. We're just putting in the address, city, state, and zip. Phone numbers and email addresses, if you have them, great. If not, not a big deal. These are just optional fields here as well. And then member QBs, this is just establishing the first and last names of the dependents, and if they live at the same address as the employee, and if not, if they need to receive their own copy of their all of their correspondence. And if they don't live at the same address, you would just simply hit no, and you would define what their new address is in the next step here when we're defining any sort of dependent information. But most of the time, they are going to be the same address, and therefore would not need to receive their own copy of all correspondence, since it is addressed to the employee and all the covered dependents and mailed directly to the employee's home address. So here we're just going to add the dependents' names and then just hit save and continue. Now we're adding any of the dependents' personal or demographic information. So we're just plugging in the dependent's date of birth, the relationship to the employee. You can get as specific or as generic as you need to here. QBID, again, that's another optional field. Social Security number, again, that's going to be optional for these dependents as well. However, again, it is something that we do like to have on file in case there's any sort of urgent issues that we need to contact the carrier about. But we do realize that in certain circumstances, such as a newborn, where they might not even have a Social Security number assigned to them yet, where that information may not be available. So if for the dependents, if you don't have a Social Security number available, we will contact you if we ever need to obtain that information at a later date. So I'm just going to plug in the SOCH, the gender, and then with the other dependents, I'm going to put in their date of birth, the relationship to the employee, their SOCH, and their gender as well. So I just hit save and continue. And then we are brought to the employee's benefit plan elections. Now here, what the system is going to do is it's going to actually cycle us through this step a few times until we've either added all the plans that are available to us, or we just hit save and continue after we've added one plan. So what we're going to want to do is select the appropriate plan that the employee had. So for example, we're going to add the medical plan. Now here, if you realize you've accidentally added the wrong plan, you can just hit cancel and delete and choose a different plan so that you can just get kicked back to the step that we were just at and choose the appropriate or correct plan. This eligibility date and premium billing start date, those are automatically populated fields based off of the qualifying event dates that you had put in the previous steps. And that's based on something that we already have built into the back end of the system, your coverage termination method. So whether or not you terminate benefits effective the date of term or the end of the month in which that term occurs, that's going to be all built into the system during setup. So it's never anything that you guys have to worry about compensating for or trying to calculate yourselves, because these are going to calculate for you based on the information that we put into the system during setup. And that's the same thing goes for the waiting period as well. There's going to be a default waiting period that we actually put into the back end of the system. So unless you have multiple waiting periods depending on the plan, you'll likely never have to mess around with anything here. So really the first thing that you're probably going to do here when you're putting in a benefit plan is jump down to tier election. And this is pretty simple and straightforward. Did they have single, double, or family coverage? Since this employee has a dependent and a child and a spouse, we're going to go with the family coverage. Now down here we have the premium subsidies, and that's something that you're going to want to use if, again, there's some sort of severance arrangement in effect. So if you're going to be paying for an employee's COBRA premiums for a certain amount of time, that's something that you can establish and build right into their record here in this system. So we can either choose to subsidize this premium, yes or no. We can plug in a date that the subsidy will end. We can do a fixed dollar amount per month subsidy or a percentage-based subsidy, and then just enter in whatever that subsidy amount is. So if we had the employee being paid for a month of COBRA, so that the subsidy is going to end effective 3/1 of 2013, we're going to want to put it in the day after that the subsidy ends. So if it's a month ending 2/28, we're going to want to put in the 3/1 date here. And then the percentage base, we're going to want to put 100%. So that's how you would enter in something, for example, for an employee that has a 1-month subsidy being completely paid. But that isn't something that happens too terribly frequently, so that's something that you can usually skip right over and jump down to initial coverage. Now here what the system is trying to ascertain is who is assigned to the benefit plan and as of what date did their benefits begin as an active employee. And that type of information is going to produce on the certificate of credible coverage. So we can assign all these dependents to the benefit plan, and we can either define whether or not there are 18 months of prior coverage or what the original begin date is. If you know that this employee has been with the company for a number of years, they've had insurance for the whole time, we can simply select yes for 18 months of prior coverage. Otherwise, if we don't know what their actual date is, or if they've been with the company for less than 18 months, we're going to want to put in the original begin date over here on the right-hand side, selecting no for the 8 months of prior coverage. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that they did have 18 months of prior coverage and hit save and continue. And that type of information, the 18 months of prior coverage or the coverage start date, is important on the certificate of creditable coverage for establishing any sort of pre-existing condition exclusions and things like that. So then here we can see that we have the benefits assigned down here at the bottom. We have the medical plan assigned. We can either delete that plan or edit any sort of information if we notice that we did something wrong, or if we wanted to just double check the information that we put in as well. So like I said, here it's cycling us through these steps until we've added all of these plans, or we just hit the save and continue button at the bottom. So even if I were to select the dental plan here, again, we're just going to select the appropriate tier election. We're going to say that they didn't have any cities in effect, and we're assigning the benefits and establishing 18 months of prior coverage. Now, one quick thing I do want to note here is that for any FSA plan that you may have, either administered through us or through another third-party administrator, it is set up a little differently. So if let's just take a look here with the flexible spending account here. We're going to hit Add this plan. And then here it looks pretty much the same until we get down to the actual tier election amount. Now, obviously here with an FSA account, it's going to want us to put in a monthly billing amount instead of an actual straight single, double, or family coverage level. And the monthly premium billing amount is determined based on the employee's contributions to the flexible spending plan as well as their annual election. And in fact, their eligibility for the flexible spending account is dependent on some of those numbers as well. Basically, for a flexible spending account, if the employee has a positive balance, meaning they have contributed more to the plan than has been dispersed back to them, then they need to be offered a flexible spending account plan for their COBRA. And how you calculate that billing amount is you actually take their annual election, you subtract out their contributions that they made to the plan, and divide that by the number of months remaining in the plan year. So let's say that this FSA plan had an effective date of 1/1/2013, and this employee had a positive balance. Now what we're going to want to do with their annual contribution, subtract out, or excuse me, their annual election, subtract out their contribution that they have made, and divide that by 11. Since they're starting at effective 2/1, then they have 11 months more remaining on the plan. Whatever that number is going to be, you plug into the monthly billing amount. So let's just say that was $50. Then we plug in that there. Now the rest of this is still we got the premium subsidies and the coverages that the dependents are assigned to. Typically what we like to do is not assign that to the dependents, since it's technically in the employee's name, and then we would just put in the original begin date of 1/1/2013 and hit save and continue. So then again, we can see the benefits assigned. We still have the vision plan up here, so we can either add that plan and hit save and continue. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit save and continue. And then here, the next step, we're having prior activity. If this is something that we do when we're setting up your guys' accounts in the system. This is something that we utilize to establish your current COBRA participants and any activity that they may have had. So we do this to already establish that they're enrolled in a certain paid through date, and when their notice has already been mailed and enrollment forms received and everything like that. So you are not going to have to mess around with anything in here at all, since you're going to be putting these in on an ongoing basis, and we're going to want to send all that information out to them. So you can just leave all that information as no and hit save and continue. Now here's step 8. We're just reviewing all the information that we put in, making sure the address is correct. We've elected them into the appropriate plans and appropriate coverage levels and everything like that. Making sure all the dependent information is correct, and all the event information and additional benefit information down here below as well. If we do notice that anything is off here, if we've maybe put in the address in incorrectly or put them into the wrong coverage level or anything like that, we can actually jump back and forth between these these wizard steps and edit any sort of information as we need to. Hit save at the bottom of the screen, and it'll come back here where we can again review all this information as needed. So if everything looks good, we just scroll down here to the bottom, hit save and add QB group. And then the system is going to give us this message here that we have this QB group submitted correctly and everything was saved as well. So from here what will happen is we'll actually get a notification on our end saying that there's a qualifying event notice waiting for your group. We'll go into the system, print it off, mail it to the participant. So then from here we can actually either restart the wizard or go back to the home page.